In the previous video, I talked about addictive relationships, what it means to be in an addictive relationship, how to know it, and what the signs are. Well, once you figure out you're actually in an addictive relationship, what do you do to let it go? In this video, we're going to actually go step by step of how to successfully move past an addictive relationship and successfully move on to your true life. Hi friends and members of this community, I'm so glad to be back today and talking about how to successfully let go and move past an addictive relationship. And we're actually going to go step by step in the process because I think it's good to really go in order of operations, because otherwise we get lost and we have a tendency of what? Getting back into the relationship. And so now it's time to look at successful ways of exiting this addictive relationship. Usually when we're in an addictive relationship, we allow anger, fear to really cloud our judgment, okay? We make comments that we might not have needed to make, and we find it difficult to move on. And when we do actually decide to move on, we usually say the absolute wrong things, okay? We say the worst possible things we can think of really in the moment because we're so emotionally driven at the time. And usually we look back at that with great regret. And because we have that regret, our mind begins to play tricks on us. Did I say the right thing? If I would have done this, could the relationship have been better? If I would have understood this, or I would have stayed quiet, maybe we could have worked it out. Maybe I just wasn't good enough, okay? Well, I'm here to tell you that there is a successful way to move past this relationship, but we've got to let go of a lot of things that cloud our judgments in the situation, because otherwise we fall back into the cycle and it takes us even longer to begin to understand our true self. So let's begin with the first step. Before you watch the rest of this video, I highly recommend that you watch the previous video. It's going to make a lot more sense, as well as it's really going to get you in the mindset for things you already know, but also to be able to understand exactly where you stand in the addictive relationship. Okay, step one. Step one is pretty self-explanatory. We've acknowledged that the relationship is unhealthy, okay? Yes, well, we have to acknowledge the fact and we have to be honest with ourselves. Otherwise, we're never going to leave this relationship, okay? So we've acknowledged that it's unhealthy and we recognize in what ways that it's actually unhealthy. The differences between a healthy and an unhealthy relationship. So that's step one. The second step is that we've begun to see the unhealthy relationship patterns in our life. And we realize that this particular relationship isn't the first one. Okay? For the most part, what happens is we're raised in unhealthy, semi-unhealthy family dynamics, okay? And we go through our life and we grow up and we learn from that time as a child, okay? And so even though some of that stuff wasn't unhealthy, we bring it into our adult life, right? And so we go through these cycles, we meet somebody, we get in a relationship, it's unhealthy. Usually, not all the time, but usually it gets progressively worse with each relationship, right? Because we're bringing the baggage into the next relationship and there's all this baggage accumulated. And so you're in 3-4 relationships out and you're like, God, this is getting horrible. And so now if you're in a relationship that's unhealthy right now and you're beginning to see the cycles like I'm talking about, you realize that this wasn't the first one and you begin to see the patterns. And when you begin to see the patterns of the relationships, you actually realize what your part in it is. Okay, the part you're playing in it, because none of us are all innocent in the situation, right? We all bring our relationship baggage in. And so as you see the patterns, you can recognize things about yourself that can help you to really identify the cycles and why you're in this relationship to begin with. Very powerful stuff, but it takes us to begin to learn how we got there in the first place. The third step in exiting an addictive relationship is that we're actually able to speak our truth to the other person without violence, without anger, and without resentment. Because we know deep down inside that this relationship is more than an unhealthy relationship. The relationship is actually a learning lesson for us to identify the cycles and patterns in our life to begin to end those negative patterns so that we can actually thrive and find our true identity. So we begin to realize this is a lesson. It's not something that's happening to us. It's actually been a gift for us to see what we need to do to make changes in our own life. The fourth step is that we defer any sort of blame. We defer blame toward that person we're in the relationship with, as well as blaming ourselves. Because we realize that both of us need to separate and to move on and to work on ourselves independent of one another. Okay? I've had clients that come into my office and they think, okay, well, we can stay together and we can independently work on ourselves. But the basis of the relationship itself is unhealthy. Okay? And the fact is that there's so much learning that needs to be done. Both people need to take it upon themselves to do it on their own. Otherwise, there's still codependency in the background, and there's still that fear of being on one's own that taints the entire expression of learning who self is. Okay? We have to be on our own to learn the big lessons in our life, especially when we don't know exactly who we are. Because if we actually knew who we are and we valued ourselves like in real life, for real, we wouldn't have been in this relationship to begin with. The fifth step is that when you're ready to break up and you're moving out separately, this can be challenging, okay? Because we're moving out, we're separating our things, we're ending the relationship. Sometimes we can come to a solid agreement where both people understand this is something that has to be done, okay? For the health and well-being of both of us, we have to end this. That's not always the case, though. More often than not, there's anger, there's resentment, the way that somebody treated somebody else. Okay, that resentment is still there. Perhaps one person doesn't want to lose the relationship because of ego. I am not going to have another failed relationship. I'm tired of this. Okay? Perhaps both of you are so addicted to one another, it's so volatile, that just being back around each other, you end up getting back together, having sex, throwing away the whole idea of leaving each other because you know it's the right thing to do, but you just get so back enmeshed into the relationship. And so if you fall into that category, you got to follow this step by step. You need to set a time to move your stuff, and that other person needs to respect that they cannot be in the house or the apartment or the condo when you're there. Okay? You have to do it separately because otherwise certain addicted feelings are going to come back into place. There might be anger and you might say some things you shouldn't because of rage and the pain that you're dealing with. And remember, this is an addictive relationship. It's just like a drug. You can't have a drug in your house when you're trying to quit doing drugs. Okay, so it's the same thing. So think about it, schedule it out, and try to make it as easy as possible for both people to move out their stuff and to go each other's separate ways. The sixth step is to move on and don't look back. We got to do it cold turkey style. I know this sounds challenging, but for many of you, because of how addicted the relationship was, it's just like any addiction. You can't just have a little bit of it. You can't just be on the phone talking. You can't just be texting or meet each other up. It's just like any other addiction. You've got to let it go, and you got to take it moment by moment until you get some time under your belt. Okay? So that means that you got to take every single hour on the hour. You don't want to sit there and think, well, I can't talk to John ever again. I can't talk to Anna ever again. I'm not going to talk to them today. And it's like any addiction, quitting smoking, quitting alcohol, quitting drugs. We got to walk through it, and we got to do it cold turkey. And that's the only way that we're going to actually get self-respect for ourselves, but it's also the only way that we're not going to run back into this addictive relationship and lose ourselves again. Number 7, be aware when your mind is playing tricks on you. Our mind has an interesting way of making us feel guilty, okay? So we begin to think about the way things were played out. Something we should have said, something we shouldn't have said, and that's why these steps are so important, because we want to do the right thing and speak the truth as much as we can so that we don't have a bunch of regret and guilt, right? But the other thing about the mind is that old habits die hard, okay? If I've been in a pattern in my life to have unhealthy relationships, in most of all my relationships, my mind's going to start telling me that the relationship really wasn't that bad. You know, they really were good. And you remember that time when he bought you flowers? Or remember that time when you had that dinner that was great, and you start thinking about all the great times. And some of those times were amazing. But the thing is that those great times were very few and far between. And we begin to forget all the unhealthy, violent, anger, addictive behavior because our mind spins this positive thought process about how the relationship is perfect and we should grovel back. And so be aware of when your mind is playing tricks on you. And when you're feeling that way and you're thinking that type of stuff, you really need to get outside, move around, exercise, and become more mindful of what you're doing in that moment to leave the thinking mind, okay? Because otherwise it's going to get you to go back into that relationship and you're going to realize that you were thinking about all the great times when those great times were really few and far between. The 8th step, you've moved on, you've moved out, you've gone cold turkey. Now it's time to be even bolder than that. You've got to get bold, baby. You've got to figure out, what do you stand for? What are your values? What are your beliefs? Okay? And I'm not talking about what your parents instilled in you when you were a kid and they told you, you will believe this and you will go to this church or whatever it is. It's about you finding you. Boldly stepping out of that box that we've created in our life and asking those really hard-hitting questions. Who am I? What do I want in my life? What do I stand for? What do I believe in? And what am I going to be behind? What am I going to be an activist for? Okay, what am I going to champion? All these things are extremely important because we're boldly building your new identity, your real identity, away from codependency and the unhealthy patterns of the past. Number 9, it's time to work with a life coach or a therapist to keep you accountable on this mission of finding your true self. Because what happens when we don't have an accountability partner, our mind starts playing those tricks on us and we begin to feel fear, right? The fear of the unknown. And what happens when we have that fear of the unknown? We want to run back to what we know, okay? And so when you have an accountability partner, when you're feeling like running back because you're scared of the unknown, they will help you to keep you centered and they will keep you accountable and help you realize what you're fighting for. You're fighting for your true identity and you're fighting the good fight to really figure out who you are. And I'm going to tell you one thing that most people don't really think about. Very few people successfully find their true self in this lifetime. Very few people even spend the time to even think about who they are. And you know what happens? Most people live their entire life unhappy because they've always just tried to get in wherever they think they fit in. They've never created their own life dynamic and they don't know what they truly stand for. So if you're willing to get here and be accountable, you're on your road to success, to happiness, and to amazing unconditional love. Last but not least, step 10. You need to realize something. You are the only person that can release yourself from this pain, fear, and resentment prison that has been created in your life. Why? Because we've created it, right? And you're the only one that can let it go. And you have to let yourself realize the fact that you owe it to yourself to let this go if you really, truly want a good life. Because that's what it's all about. We have to allow ourselves to have a good life. We have to know that we're deserving of this good life. And we have to work for it. Like anything in life, working for that good job, okay? Finishing school and working for those grades. It's like anything you work for. Working to buy that car. You have to work really hard to have a successful, healthy life. And you got to work at it every day. Okay? It's just like another job, but it's more rewarding because it pays off every moment of every day for the rest of your life. It's not a car that depreciates. It's not a job that you can lose because the company runs out of money. Okay? It's not the grades on a piece of paper that don't matter anyway years after you've gotten them. This is something that lasts you forever. And so it's your time to embark on this journey. The journey that says, I am better than this. I am love. I am light. And I am going to find the key and I'm going to unlock this prison, and I'm never going back into it. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and also share it with your friends and family. There's probably some content on this channel in our community that could really help them in their day-to-day life. Also, if you like this video, please click the like button. Love to see that. And if you have some comments about how you've walked away from an addictive relationship and some of the things that you did to hold yourself accountable, I'd love to read that in the comments section below. And again, I appreciate you being a part of this community, and I appreciate you tuning in today. But in the meantime, always remember, it's your time. You hold the key to walk out of that prison and to begin to live your true life. Are you currently in a toxic relationship and unsure what the next day will bring? Have you often wondered if there's more to life than this? Do you suffer from self-esteem issues that you've had since you were a young child? Have issues or have difficulty speaking with your family? Do you feel surrounded by self-centered people? Seems as though you're always giving and they're always taking. If you've answered yes to any of these questions, you need some answers. The 10-day challenge to live your true life gives you the knowledge and techniques for creating boundaries in your life that help us to deal with family, as well as dealing with those narcissistic and toxic people in your life. It offers the insight into understanding and overcoming your self-esteem issues, and to begin to see for the first time your amazing value. You owe it to yourself to find the power within you.